I'm sure plenty of you know this by now, but Evade had its official overhaul release after about more than a year. As a whole, I think the update is pretty good. I personally enjoy stuff like the 2 perk slots, but there's quite a bit of controversy surrounding the movement side of things. Just to be clear, this won't cover my thoughts on the entirety of the overhaul update, but just primarily the movement aspects. Just a brief summary for anyone wondering, I personally don't think it's a bad update by any means. It's obviously buggy here and there, but I don't doubt that it will get polished after some time. I'll try my best to summarize all my points, recommendations, suggestions, concerns without it sounding like biased word vomit. I guess without further ado, let's talk about the movement systems. So during a few weeks before the overhaul update actually released, they were periodically opening up testing and getting feedback. One of the main takeaways for movement players was that the actual base movement system itself was super good. I'll put some clips up on the screen to show what testing's movement system looked like. The movement system has its upsides and downsides, so I guess let's talk about that. The raw b-hopping in testing was super good. It may be hard to notice if you're not experienced, but it felt more responsive, way snappier, more polished, and overall just a way better base for movement, especially when compared to legacies. Maybe this was because your speed was for the most part uncapped. You could go up to like 80 or 90 speed while just b-hopping without any speed boosts. I know someone was able to hit like 200 or 500 speed while just b-hopping with no speed boost or anything, which is a bit absurd. The main downsides of testing's movement system was that when using faster macros, you would pretty much get strafe locked when going up ramps. It was also very prominent with lower frame rates for some reason. You could lower your macro speed by like 20 milliseconds and that would usually fix the issue, but it would still feel very slow, especially when b-hopping. The other issue, which I personally don't think is too big of a deal, is that the testing's movement system was uncapped. You could pretty much go as fast as you wanted, and some people argue that going 90 speed is too much. However, I beg to differ. Evade's movement has always felt very slow, even if you're an advanced movement player. A lot of the time you end up draining through colas or using speedruns to do anything worthwhile. It's way more enjoyable when you can still go fast without the necessity of speed boosts, especially when all of these new or revamped maps are quite literally 3 times bigger. I mean, it is ridiculous how much larger some of these maps are. I mean, just look at this comparison of a staircase in Legacy Jungle versus Overhaul Jungle. So as unbalanced as it seems to have the speed uncapped or drastically raised, it totally makes sense and is 100% fitting for Overhaul, especially when these maps have gotten drastically larger. Anyways, that's enough about testing's movement system. What about Overhaul's current movement system? The developers decided to change the jumping system back to Legacy's, just a little bit reworked. From what I know, this is because testing's jump system was having issues with tripping, which was likely in correlation to strafe locking when you would ramp. That and it was too fast. I will put some footage in the background that shows what Overhaul's movement looks like, but even if you're not experienced with movement, it should be pretty noticeable that this is significantly worse. It feels very jank, dull, slow, and it just feels way worse compared to testing's system. This is like pretty much the exact same as Legacy's movement, which is a huge letdown, especially to the movement players who've waited almost 2 years for something newer, better, faster, and more polished. Testing's movement system was exactly that, and yet here we are, reverted straight back to Legacy's outdated and objectively worse system. Overhaul's movement system fixes the strafe locking with macros and controls the speed, but at what cost? A worse base for movement, controlled and slow movement when we have gigantic maps. The casual player may not care because they don't care to adjust to a new movement system, or people still haven't gotten bored of Evade's legacy system. And all of these are fair points, but regardless of the bias, I can't sit here and deny that testing's movement system was fundamentally better. If you don't know already, Oster made a community poll in the Evade Discord server asking which movement system was better, and the Legacy's jump system is winning. This poll is primarily targeted towards movement players, which are still a small minority in the community, yet casual players and inexperienced players may still vote on the opposite end. Regardless, testing's movement system is still really good, and arguably a better movement system that can be optimized as time goes on. It would be a complete waste of time, potential, and code to throw away a system like this. It just makes no sense. Now that I've explained the 2 different systems, I'll talk about the suggestions, feedbacks, or any possible concerns I may have. So as I've already gone over, the movement system poll is leaning towards keeping the legacy system, and from what I've heard, Oster does not plan on changing it anytime soon. However, this isn't terrible news, and it might even be good. I'll explain why. This is a recommendation that I heavily suggest that they add, or at the very least consider, especially if they want to appeal to both sides of their community. The recommendation being that they can keep Overhaul's movement, but can make a game mode that uses Testing's movement system. This is a perfect use of the Game Modes tab. It appeals to casual players playing in regular Evade, and movement players who can play in their own movement game mode. Ideally, the game mode will have a reward system, reduced or not, although I would still take a movement game mode with no rewards if it's that extreme. Just for clarification, this suggestion is not for a temporary game mode, or something that can be removed with a poll like we've seen with Oddball, which is a tragedy in of itself. And speaking about Oddball, having a more tame, slower paced movement system such as Overhauls would literally be perfect for game modes in similar vein to Oddball, Infection, or even Tag. The big issue with these competitive game modes is because the movement is too fast, and it probably would have been too fast with the Testing's movement system. That's why there were people constantly complaining about bad hitboxes in Oddball, so a movement system like the current would be way more appropriate. Genuinely, the only issues that I can think of are that strafe locking still needs to be fixed while retaining the same jumping system, which I don't doubt is possible, but it might be very difficult. And obviously that they would need to include a toggle between each movement system within the VIP server menu. At the end of the day, I do realize it comes off as and sounds very entitled for the movement community to declare what updates the game does or doesn't get, and that's definitely not the approach I'm trying to take. I do realize casual players could care less about what movement players have to say or think, especially when some of us come off as ungrateful bumbling buffoons. But I think the reality is that a good chunk of the loyal player base in the game's community are movement players who've stuck with this game primarily because of the movement scene. And it can be extremely disappointing and upsetting when we've waited 2 years for a newer, better movement system, just for that system to get completely snubbed for an outdated, slightly reworked, arguably worse system. I completely understand that Oster and Beef are prioritizing the bugs and other additions outside of movement, and I encourage them to continue doing so, but when given the opportunity or chance, I strongly encourage them to consider the suggestions that I've given, or at the very least, implement Testing's movement systems somewhere. Just so I don't sound like I'm the only person voicing my opinion or suggestions, I was able to get Journey to share his thoughts and opinions about the updates and changes, so let's hear that.
Yeah, like Ma was explaining, I think if you're going to add a tag or crown themed game mode like Oddball, it will be necessary to have a slower paced movement system. Whether it be a slower speed cap like 60 to 70, or disabling all equipment and utilities like cola, speed pads, grapple, etc. Like Ma said, people kept complaining about Oddball's bad hitbox. I think the best solution is making a crown related game mode with a tagging system similar to Untitled tag games, where instead of walking in front of a player to steal the crown from them, you implement an aim and click tagging system. It feels much more consistent, responsive, and just less janky overall. There's a lot of ways to make a tag related game mode feel less sweaty or unfair, while making them more appealing to the average player who might feel discouraged to play them. Oddball was the reason I tried out movement in the first place, and I feel that it could push more people into the movement scene. But besides Oddball, I agree that Testing's B-hopping felt way smoother and more polished compared to B-hopping in Overhaul's official release. However, I don't think you should be able to go over 100 speed while B-hopping, like how it was in Testing. I think the cap should be anywhere between 80 to 100 speed. Any higher will just make the game feel unbalanced, and it will make cramped indoor maps just feel awkward. Now, I'm not too big on the idea of Testing movement being a separate game mode from Overhaul. Testing's jump system felt way more responsive overall, especially when comparing it to Overhaul's jumping. Of course, movement will still need tweaks or adjustments here and there, but I don't think separating casual players from movement players is necessary. Although I'm not against the idea of a game mode with Testing's movement system that people can try out if they're curious, but I personally think adjusting and combining Testing's highlights with Overhaul's current system would be the most refined movement experience yet. Alright, enough of that. I have some suggestions I'll go over. Something that bothered me and literally everyone else I've talked with is being able to force whatever map or special round you want by paying with Robux. I really don't see a point for it being in the game, it just seems like a greedy feature that no one asked for. Buying a custom bot is fine, but this is just annoying. In larger servers, people just force darkness or lurking every round, especially on maps like Maze. A major flaw with Overhaul's current ramping and bouncing is that without any speed boost, you move way too slow to start up any route. Now when you trim steep ramps you lose a lot of speed, and you'd be lucky to bounce even once or twice without spamming cola. In Legacy you would actually gain more speed from ramping or bouncing, so you wouldn't have to rely on cola or speed rounds all the time. Now it's pretty much a necessity to have speed boost when trying to do any route, especially when you lose speed every bounce. I think reverting the Hermes nerf back to 80% acceleration like before would make it a lot easier to gain speed when ramping. Now, I do enjoy wall running in some ways. It's fun on a few maps and I think overall it's a cool feature, but it can get annoying when you're trying to b-hop and you randomly cling to a wall. If it's possible to add a keybinds feature in settings, being able to change wall running from spacebar to another key would be nice. In general, a keybind setting would improve the game in a lot of ways. That, or just allow us to toggle wall running on or off in settings. I've said this multiple times, but please allow us to toggle certain particles off, like precipitation, player unusuals, stuff like that. Overhaul's performance should be way higher priority than having a game that looks nice, especially when 80% of players don't even play with max graphics on. And again, I've said this before, but being able to toggle off our first-person leg view models would be a convenient and simple option. Same with having a day/night toggle option. It's extremely frustrating trying to record or clip gameplay when it's night. It ends up looking choppy and pixelated all the time, and if it's a darkness game mode, you literally cannot see anything. The last thing I want to talk about, I don't think making Legacy a limited time game mode is a great idea. I think forcing players to get used to Overhaul for a few months is necessary. However, if it's possible to have a perfect replica of Legacy as an optional game mode, why delete it forever? Even if you release Legacy as a limited time game mode a few times throughout the year, people are going to want to play the old maps and experience the old look and feel. It will feel nostalgic and might make people appreciate Overhaul even more. Newer players might also be curious as to what Legacy Evade felt like. If it's possible to do something like that, I think the community as a whole would appreciate it. It's harmless fun. Alright, enough yapping. That's all the suggestions I had. I'll let Ma finish the rest.
This next section will be screenshots of what other well-known movement players have to say or suggest about the movement in Overhaul. I won't read over them since it'll take way too long, but I highly advise you to pause the video and go over each of them. And any social links provided from each person will be put down in the description, so be sure to check them out as a special thanks for helping make this video. I'll try to wrap this up quickly since this has probably gone on for way too long now, and I'm sure plenty of people have gotten extremely bored by now. I guess I'll go over some things before we wrap up this video. I think I should start by mentioning that the changes made between testing and Overhaul are on the jumping system itself. I don't think stuff like bouncing or emote hopping was affected directly from the updates, and I know a lot of this stuff, including bouncing, is very flawed. However, I do not doubt that they will be improved as time goes on. That's why I don't really mention or get in detail about them. Speaking about bouncing, I think I should briefly talk about it. The bouncing in Overhaul as of now is pretty bad, and I think it's because of the change in the jumping system. The bouncing currently feels like it works 2 out of 3 times, and even if it does work, you always actively lose speed, sometimes a lot of it. For me and a few other people, bouncing and testing felt way better and more consistent. You would also actually gain speed too, although that was probably because you wouldn't decelerate or lose as much speed when hitting the floor with the testing jump system. I don't doubt that this is something that can still be improved, but bouncing got significantly worse with the jump system changes in Overhaul. My main focus in this video was to explain the different jump systems, because having the right one will lead to a better, more polished feeling movement system in the future, implying that they will improve bouncing and all that stuff later down the line. Anyways, I think that just about covers everything I have to say and go over. For all I know, this entire video could just fall on deaf ears, and making it would be a complete waste of time, so I'm really hoping that's not the case. I'm just hoping some of the feedback or suggestions do make it through to the developers. I know a lot of the community outside of movement players get pretty defensive, especially when the 100th movement player today that thinks he's a know-it-all determines whether or not the whole update was bad based on their criteria, which I hope this video doesn't come off as the same case, because that's definitely not what I'm trying to aim for whatsoever. I want this video to be informative and reasonable. I understand Evade shouldn't have to appeal to movement players or the minority, but I'm 100% willing to help suggest solutions that are the best for both worlds. Anyways, I think that should just about do it. I don't think I have anything else to add on or say. Of course, if you have any questions or something to say, feel free to comment and I'll try my best to respond. Anyways, that's enough from me. I hope you all have a great day and night, and yeah, have a good one.